my name is Dr. Ginny Baro, your host, and also the CEO and founder of Fearless Women at Work, an executive coaching and career strategy company. And today I want to welcome you to the show because I have an excellent guest with me, Carolyn Kiel. Hi, Carolyn.
Hey, everybody. Hi, Jenny. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's so good to have you here, Carolyn. I know that only a few weeks ago I was on your podcast.
Yes, absolutely. And that episode just came out. So thank you for having me on your show.
Oh my gosh, it's my pleasure. It's so good to have you here. And I always tell people that networking and the power of networking is amazing. And again, Carolyn and I met networking on LinkedIn. So because we reached out to each other, we were able to collaborate, and I'm excited to share with you a wonderful show. So today, Carolyn and I are going to be discussing everyday leaders and leadership with eyes wide open. And specifically, we're going to be touching on three topics. So the fact that talent is everywhere. Our second topic will be specifically leadership with eyes wide open. And our third topic will be mobilizing your team for performance excellence. So before I tell people who you are, Carolyn, why don't we start with your why today? What is your why?
Sure. So my why is really helping people unlock their talents and help them achieve their goals. So whether that's a personal goal that someone's trying to achieve in their personal life or in their own careers, or with an organization helping them to achieve business goals, I really help mobilize people to achieve goals, whatever they're looking to do.
That's awesome. And people will be able to realize why that is your why when I tell them more about you. So let me give you a bit of a background about Carolyn. So Carolyn is a learning and development leader. So that makes sense now, right? And she's also the host of the Beyond 6 Seconds podcast, which we already mentioned. Now she's based in New Jersey, where she designs and delivers learning and development programs. She's also helped people at several large companies to develop their talents, navigate change, and achieve their business goals. Now, Carolyn has a bachelor's degree in psychology from Vassar College and a master's degree in organizational behavior from Fairleigh Dickinson University. This year, in 2018, Carolyn started an empowering podcast, Beyond 6 Seconds, which features the extraordinary stories of everyday people who overcome challenges and make a positive impact on the world. So you can find Carolyn's podcast at beyond6seconds.com, that's the number 6, and on Apple Podcasts. She'll tell us more about how to reach her later on in the show. She also has a gift for those of you who stick around, so I hope you do and benefit from that gift that she's going to share with you. So Carolyn, let's dive right in. And as you share with us in terms of your why, the reason why I wanted to have you on this show is that, as you know, this channel is devoted to leadership development and how can leaders make better decisions around tapping talent and maximizing the talent that they have. So it's very appropriate to have you as a guest. And I know while you and I were preparing for this interview, you share with me your why, and that's why I wanted you to share with the audience as well. So let's go into what you mean by talent is everywhere, and while I do that, I'm also going to start the timer so that we don't go 2 hours, because I know how easily that can happen, okay? So yeah, share with us, what do you mean by talent is everywhere?
Well, for me, I'm a little bit obsessed with helping people find their talents. So I always look in different areas of whether I'm at work or just in my personal life, even on social media with the people that I network with, to understand, what people are good at, what their sweet spots are, what are people talking about, and what do they want to learn more about. So I found, even beyond talent, I also found, especially in where I work and the people that I speak with in my podcasts, that really there's all kinds of leaders that exists. A lot of times when we think of a leader, we think of the very glossy, one-dimensional image of either the person sort of charging up the hill, or yelling and trying to, mobilize and get people to do things, sort of a stereotypical
extrovert.
Exactly, the strong extrovert, or just someone who's very comfortable speaking about, every little thing that they're doing. And you notice that on social media a lot, especially LinkedIn, a platform that I love, but there's, a lot of, people who have really made a name for themselves, really talking about their leadership. And that's certainly one type of leadership, and, really a strong one, particularly around people working on their own projects, starting their own businesses.
Right.
But as more of an introvert myself and an introvert leader, I'm always very tuned in and appreciative of the leadership qualities that people demonstrate where they're not out shouting on the mountaintop. They're literally getting the work done, and they're inspiring other people, whether they're setting a great example or they're helping people. They're always available and helping to guide them, coach them, provide an information resource. So as a quick example in my life, when I started at my very first big major job at MasterCard, I started as an administrative assistant, and I was trained by another administrative assistant who spent a good week with me, just very patiently explaining how everything worked, and here's all the systems, here's how things work at the organization, introducing me to a few people. And, she was not someone who was very, loud and known as a leader, but I thought she was definitely one of the first leaders that I came in contact with, because her patience and the information she was willing to share with me and the great example that she set was one that I continue to follow for years. And I still often think about, even though it's been a while since that time passed.
Well, she obviously made an impact on you.
Absolutely.
And I so appreciate that you're bringing this up, because what this reminds me of, Carolyn, is the fact that there are different styles. And we tend to reward people who have a similar style to ours, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. We either reward them because we like them and we take to them.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, like you said, there are people who may be in the opposite camp in terms of styles who are also having their own impact.
Yeah. And it ties into, a wider conversation about diversity and inclusion in organizations. And I know, Ginny, you and I talked about this a little bit on the podcast, which everyone should listen to after the show.
Of course.
Where we had a conversation about mentoring, and we were making the point that a lot of times we do have that instinct to gravitate towards people who remind us of younger versions of ourselves.
That's right.
Whether that's in style or background or just strengths and interests, which is great. It is one great way to build a strong relationship. But at the same time, we really need to be mindful of that and saying, well, am I only mentoring? Am I only helping out people, one kind of person?
That's right.
Looking for other types of talent. What are my gaps? Who are the people I can learn from? So
that's right. And one of the things that does to us as leaders is it stretches us,
mm-hmm.
right? Because then we have to even learn how to be effective and communicative and have an impact with people that are different from us. And isn't that the population, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's how we learn. A lot of times, we start out learning things, we don't always know what our natural strengths are. Some of them you may know from an early age, but a lot of times it takes trying new things to understand what your talents really are. I mean, for me, that was the case with podcasting. I just one of the reasons I tried it, I just wanted to get better on the microphone, be a better interviewer, maybe do something fun and creative and learn about people. And it's really helped me uncover some, hidden or more dormant talents in myself.
That's right. I actually described to you that when I listened to our podcast, I was giving you accolades about how great you sound, and you sound so polished and so professional and so on. And it's like you would have never discovered that about you because of the medium in which you were operating, right?
Absolutely.
So I am so glad that you are an example for us of what it's like to follow your curiosity and explore something completely new. Similar to you, I had always been, had a proclivity towards communications. I actually wanted to study communications when I was in high school going to college. And my dad, took me aside and said, honey, you hardly speak English. I think you should consider maybe STEM as a much better field for you. And in hindsight, I'm grateful that my dad kind of had the vision to guide me in that direction. But here I am, almost 50 years old, and I'm now doing these shows, not because I have to, but because I want to. And similarly with you, you don't have to do your podcast.
Right. And it's just because you weren't good at something, years ago, doesn't mean you can't be good at it later in your life, or you can't learn it, and just because you don't have a degree in a certain area.
Right.
These days it's so easy to learn about new things with the internet and YouTube and online courses.
That's right.
It can take a lot of resources to learn new skills.
One of the things, I'm so glad you brought up that point, Carolyn, because one of the things that was really holding me back from even writing a book was the fact that I read such wonderful books, right? And the authors are amazing, and they're engaging, and they have tons of research and resources. And when I was writing mine, I was thinking, oh my goodness, I have piles of research that I've looked into, but nothing like, let's say, the Lean In book that I love from Sheryl Sandberg. So I had to come to terms with, this is my level right now. These are the resources that I have available. So to combine what we're talking about and that example that I just gave, there are times when our curiosity is going to take us over, because we don't have to be experts at something in order to play with it and explore it and see where it leads.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
And it's interesting, that point that you made, because I interview a lot of people who are new entrepreneurs, and a very similar point comes up as to one you just made, is that a lot of times when they realized what their strengths and what their value was when people were asking them for advice on something. And a lot of times they'd say, why are you asking me? I don't know anything about this. I'm not an expert in this. And actually they were. It didn't feel like they were, but people started viewing them that way, and that became something of value that they could share with people.
That's right. That's awesome. Sometimes people are the best mirrors, right? They mirror back to us what they see. Just like when people will stop in your office and always ask for advice, and you're like, people always come to my office for advice. And then you realize that it's that listening skills that you have, where you are listening to them non-judgmentally, that makes you realize, people trust me. They know that I'm not a blabbermouth. They know that I'm not going to be spewing whatever they tell me to the rest of the company. So that's when I also realized that coaching was probably a good field for me, because it was all natural. I didn't have to effort and try and struggle. It was a natural progression and transition. So yeah, it's all about experimenting, playing, and also giving yourself the freedom to play, right, with your curiosity.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Awesome. So what do we want to conclude when it comes to talent is everywhere, Carolyn? What's the takeaway?
Let's see. I would say, one, if you're a leader in an organization, just be aware that, you have a great wealth of talent within your organization. It's not necessarily restricted to the highest leaders on your executive team. It really exists everywhere. And it's always, sometimes a challenge in larger organizations to uncover that talent, but it's definitely something worth doing. And I think something that'll tie us into the next point in just a minute with leadership. And then from a personal perspective, just thinking that, talent is not something that you're just born with on your first day and that's all you get. It's something that you discover and learn, evolve. So, don't be afraid to try new things and, even fail a little bit and then try again and get better, because it's really rewarding when you find new talents. Absolutely.
I love that message. And also what you said earlier about how there are leaders that are leading quietly.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Absolutely.
I think that's so important to notice that and to also reward that.
Definitely.
Right. Awesome. So let's go into our next topic, leadership with eyes wide open. Let's talk about what that means.
Sure. So for that I really wanted to bring to light and bring into emphasis that a good leader really is mindful and aware of the people that they work with. And what I mean is really kind of aware of their talents, their strengths, and really tries to leverage those in order to get the strongest team that they can. And some leaders, and certainly a couple that I've worked with in the past at other companies, maybe we're a little afraid to ask those questions. Maybe you're a new leader, you come into an organization, and sometimes there's an unspoken expectation that everyone's looking to the leader because leader knows what to do right away.
Right.
Well, a lot of times, leaders really don't always know everything that's the right thing to do. That's why they have teams. So as a leader, it's about maybe being a little vulnerable and not being afraid to say that you don't know, and also being curious as a leader. So, don't be afraid to get to know your people. Don't be afraid to ask questions, especially when you're a new leader. But, once you've been there a while, definitely don't lose that ability and that inclination. And as I said, show your vulnerability. Because
I love this.
Yep.
I love this point. And the reason why I love this point is that you're right. Most people, especially the leader, right, may think that I need to have all the answers.
Yeah.
And if somebody asks the questions, I have to come up with something, even if I have to make it up.
Yeah.
And the truth is that you do have a team. And especially if you're new and you're kind of learning the ropes and, getting your bearings. And even when you have been there for a long time, a question may come up where that is not your expertise necessarily, even though it may be within your team. Mm-hmm. So how can we recommend for a leader who's stuck in, I need to know all the answers, that they get out of that mode? And how can they be open to being vulnerable and saying, I don't know the answer to that, but I know in my team, Carolyn happens to be the expert in that. Would that be one of the ways in which they can handle it, Carolyn, you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think some of the best leaders who are good at showing vulnerability and good at learning and inspiring their people are also really good storytellers. So I always think of that as one technique that leaders can use in order to be vulnerable, but it's sort of a prepared vulnerability. It's like baby steps.
Right.
So, for example, in a previous company that I worked with where I was working on a corporate culture change initiative, we actually put together small guides for the leaders that would help them tell a story to demonstrate a point around our culture. So one of our culture values was around recognition and appreciation. So I had put together with my team a short little workbook that helped people or leaders ask questions to their team. So literally you take 10 minutes at a staff meeting, you say, this is what I want to learn about. Tell me a little bit about how you like to be appreciated. What kinds of recognition or appreciation do you like and what resonates with you? And it was a short exercise. But some of the feedback I got from our senior leaders, a couple they were like, well, I feel kind of silly asking these questions now. I've been leading these people for a while. Like, I would kind of expect that I know this. It seems kind of a basic thing to be asking. And it's like, well, honestly, you may not know. I mean, if you've never asked and maybe you don't work with everybody day to day, like, how would you know that? So, it's really just about opening up and having a conversation. And I with my team put together more short workbooks like that featured, how to talk about accountability. So then we would coach the leader through, how do I tell a story about a time when something happened and that leader either, stepped up and took accountability for their role in it, or, in some cases, sometimes the more negative story about maybe, what you learned from not being accountable and you should have, and sharing that with your team and then asking, well, what do you think about accountability? What does that mean to you? And how do we apply that to our work here at the company? So kind of short conversations were a way to break the ice and get people comfortable in very short bites with showing that vulnerability with their teams.
And so if you notice in both examples that you gave us, right, the one about the leader who said, why should I ask them how they like to be rewarded or recognized? And then now talking about accountability, how the assumption that we're making as a leader is that there's more to lose by doing it than by not doing it.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, would you be pissed off if you were asked by your leader, how do you like to be recognized? Like, I would never be pissed off.
I mean, maybe there's a handful of people who might be like, why don't they know that? But the vast majority of people, I think, they'd probably be shocked, first of all.
Exactly. What they're asking?
And again, it goes back to the trust. It depends, maybe some people always say, well, why are they asking these questions? What's behind this? But
right, the skeptics.
It takes time to really build that trust.
Right. You're absolutely right. But I love the idea of storytelling. And using storytelling as a way to facilitate being vulnerable and getting to information in a way that is it's authentic, right? Because you are using a real example, you're sharing a story of potentially something that happened to you or to somebody that you know, I love that idea.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Carolyn.
Thank you.
So leadership with eyes wide open, what is it that we're asking the audience to take away from this point?
As a leader, I would say don't be afraid to be vulnerable and don't be afraid to ask questions and learn more about your people. Because in the end, you can really only win. You'll get a better idea of what motivates the people that you work with, what their talents are, what their interests are. And that then, you kind of know what's in your toolbox for achieving
That's
your
right.
goal. So it's a win-win situation.
That's right. And instead of assuming that everybody likes to be rewarded the same way that you do,
That's big.
it's going to be different from person to person. And because
Absolutely.
people have different whys, they have different drivers.
And one person's big exciting reward is another person's like
Nightmare.
dreadful nightmare. So it's
Yes,
important to know.
yes. A perfect example of that is when you get chosen as the employee of the month.
Hmm.
I know there are people that would crawl under a bed
Yeah.
before they get chosen as employee of the month, and others will be singing from the rooftops.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, if you're trying to reward somebody by giving them employee of the month and that's something that would be a nightmare for them, you better know whether or not they're going to take it that way. So I know when we are even putting together rewards and recognition programs within the companies that I've worked for, those have been the kind of issues that we raise, that not everybody likes to be rewarded the same way.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Excellent. So let's move on to the third and last topic, which is how to mobilize your team for performance excellence. So let's talk about what you mean by that, Carolyn.
Sure. So I guess building on what we've been talking about with the other two topics is that once you get a good understanding of your team and their talents, as a leader, I personally believe that it's your responsibility to try to put people in the right roles that are using their strengths and helping develop important talents that either you need for the business or that they need based on what their career goals are. So, and if you can't do this through the everyday work on your team, because, some leaders, there's only certain types of work and you may not have, there's always work that people don't necessarily want to do and you may not have a one-to-one match on your team. But definitely be interested in people's career development and be willing to help them make connections with the people and the resources that can help them develop if you can't provide that kind of work in your immediate team. So as much as you can, as a leader, connect people with mentors, with training recommendations, even job shadowing. I did that at work earlier this year as I was getting used to my new role. And that is an amazing experience just to really
It is.
understand truly what is a role like and what happens in different parts of the business that you may not normally get to see. Again, as a leader, you don't have to have all the answers,
That's
but
right.
since you're a leader, you most likely have more visibility in the organization and across the organization, and you probably have a different network or a higher level network. With your people, work with them and help them tap into that network and build those skills. It doesn't.
Carolyn,
Yeah, exactly.
what would we say? Because the reality is that managers are exhausted, right?
Yeah.
They're being pulled in so many different directions. So so I'm going to play devil's advocate and say, yes, that sounds wonderful, but I have to do my job, right? I am a leader. I have responsibilities. I have deliverables. I have projects I need to get done. How do I fit all of this in?
Yeah, I mean, it is challenging. And that's like one of the number one challenges that I hear from managers who are, extremely busy and, got so much going on just like the rest of us do. My challenge, my suggestion for that would be, you know, set aside some time regularly to meet and talk with your people. I mean, if you have an enormous team, it's difficult to meet with people on a once a week or once every 2 weeks basis. But especially if you're on a smaller team, set aside, even if it's just a half hour every other week or, and it really depends on your teammates and how much time they feel they may need from you. And even if it's just a couple minutes to check in and say, I just want to, you could use that opportunity to give feedback on a recent
That's
project
right.
in the moment or give some coaching or just ask, what are your thoughts? We talked about this career aspiration that you had a couple months ago. What are you thinking around that? Are you still interested in that? What have you done towards that? And again, I think once as you're building that trust and if you're building that approachability as a leader. So understanding, even if you're a busy leader, there are certain leaders who are very busy who I understand if I'm working with them that I can still grab them for a couple minutes or put some time on their calendar if that's how they prefer to manage their time.
Right.
They're still accessible and they will still, be a sounding board for me to bounce ideas off of. So I think it's that, kind of building on the things that we were talking about earlier with trust, with approachability, and a genuine interest in your team.
Right.
It doesn't have to take you don't have to spend like hours mapping out people's career strategies with them. It's just literally like they come in for 5 minutes like, oh, I'm really interested in learning about, I don't know, supply chain or something.
Right.
And it's like, oh, I know so-and-so who works on that team. Let me give you, either let me just give you their name and contact. You can tell them that I suggested that
I
you
send you, yeah.
or I can connect you or something like that. Again,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be a long thing.
So it may sound simple, but what I'm hearing you say, Carolyn, is look, there is ways to manage by creating that time in your calendar where you meet with your staff. And normally people have 6 to 8 direct reports, right? Otherwise it's ineffective.
Right.
And then create that space where you have that one-on-one or a small group or whatever the case may be, where you do get to be a sounding board, where you get to touch base, right? Check in with the team and use that space wisely, use that time wisely.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I like that. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And so I know time flies when you are having fun. So is there anything else, Carolyn, that we want to share with the audience when it comes to the topics of everyday leaders and leadership with eyes wide open? I think you did a great job, encapsulating the first two. Let's give a little takeaway for the last one of mobilizing your team for performance excellence. One thing that you and I had discussed was, I believe that people, when they're in the right roles, they rock it.
Yeah.
Right. And to me, a big sign that somebody's misaligned with their role is when they're not rocking it. Now, we know that there are times when people are not going to rock it no matter where you put them, because they're just not the right resource. And that's okay too, right? Because at some point we can recognize that and say, listen, I think there's a misfit here, right? We just can't find a place where this person is going to thrive. In which case, I think we are doing them a favor by releasing them and letting them find wherever that is. And I know that may sound harsh, but it's the truth, right? And I have a friend who always says that you're not doing your company or that employee a service, because someone else is out there unemployed who would die and kill to do that role and would rock that role. So I think we have to be compassionate and at the same time realistic about the resources that we have and how we're managing them and what they're doing. And if we give somebody the opportunity to step up, right, and show us, or we are able to recognize what are their talents, and we make our assessment, we put them in that role and they're still not thriving, they're still not doing well, then that's another conversation.
Yeah. Exactly. Everybody has the potential to be a rock star employee as long as they're in the right role. And, so often things don't always work out. You're not always in the ideal role. So it's incumbent upon you as the person in the role to really try to look across your career, look at your current roles, what other roles do you want in the future, and understand what your strengths are, what your preferences are, what your weaknesses or gaps are, what you need to get better at. And, ideally you have a leader who's helping you along in the way and feedback so you can learn about yourself too.
So even as a leader, that would actually be a healthy exercise to do. If somebody on your team, so if you're a team member and you feel misaligned, it is a great idea to actually bring this up eventually, right? Because if you have a good manager, and I know people would argue that they don't have a good manager, but if you have a good manager, that manager will help you and work with you, right? To maybe find another home for you even within the same company.
Yeah.
Because I have seen that happen often, where people just get moved to a different group, where they have their interests are more aligned with each other. So I know it takes a little fearlessness to do that, right? To be able to take accountability and say, I don't feel like I'm doing my best here. I think I may be best aligned or better aligned with the operations group or the finance group.
Yeah. And that's always tough because once you say that to your leader, it kind of flips the switch on most leaders' minds that say, all right, this person is kind of not going to be on my team for much longer, which is a little terrifying as a person who, may not like their role, but is interested in keeping their job, and their income. But
Sure.
in the long run, it really is, it's much better to be in a place where you're using your strengths and your talents and you can be a rock star employee.
And I think that would be leadership with eyes wide open too,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
So instead of thinking you have somebody doing a job, you would say, okay, I need to find this person a new home, and I need to find somebody who fits this role.
Definitely.
So I think in the long run, it's going to be a win-win.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree.
Awesome. Carolyn, oh my goodness, it's time to say goodbye.
Gosh, already. It really does fly.
So I know that you have, let's first talk about how people can connect with you, and then you can tell people about the gift that you have for them. So how can people get in touch with you, Carolyn?
Absolutely. So you can, as you said earlier in the show, you can find my podcast on www.beyond6seconds.com, and that is the number 6. Also on Apple Podcasts and a variety of other podcast players as well. If you're listening to a podcast player, it's probably on there.
Yay.
And my email address, I believe we'll put up as well, beyond6seconds@gmail.com. Please get in touch if you have an inspiring story of your own of personal growth or a great challenge you've overcome, and how you've shown leadership and really helped make the world a better place. I'd love to hear from you. Always interested in having more guests. I've had incredible people from all around the country and in other countries as well on the show, and would love to hear new inspiring stories and share them with my audience.
So Carolyn, about how many podcasts have you had so far?
So as of today, I actually launched episode 26.
That's awesome.
So now I'm doing them once a week, so I'm sure there will be more by the time this show
Yay.
airs. But
Absolutely.
It's incredible.
Well, I so appreciate you for what you're doing. This is amazing. And you're giving voice to a lot of people who normally don't have, don't find an outlet for their voice. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for having me on your podcast a few weeks back. I'm so excited about what came out ultimately. Right. And you can reach me, Dr. Ginny Baro, at fearlesswomenatwork.com, and on my email, drginny@fearlesswomenatwork.com. Thank you so much, Carolyn, and I am excited for you to share with the audience how they can find that gift.
Yes, absolutely. So I have a special gift for everybody who is listening to the show today. And it is a checklist for getting started with podcasting. So I just started in the beginning of this year and really had to learn a lot about, what equipment do I need? What services are out there? How do I even get started? And sometimes it can be overwhelming. So I put together some of the best practices I used, and I've got it in a really short little reference sheet. And I believe, Ginny, if I do have a link that goes directly to that document where you can download. So, Ginny.
So we'll include that for everybody. Yeah, we'll include that when we publish the video and release it.
Awesome. So, yeah, please check that out, and I hope you find it helpful.
Thank you so much for that, and thank you for sharing that with the audience. Thank you for being with us today. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, only if you did, please share it with your social media and your networks, and I look forward to the next show. I'll talk to you soon, Carolyn.
Take care. Thank you.
You too. Bye.
Bye.